sisters, and even fewer could have imagined just how far she would eventually fall, for when the camera's first few could have predicted just how far Amy Slayton would rise when she first appeared on TLC's 1,000-pound turned toward her life in Dixon, Kentucky, she was not a celebrity but a struggling woman weighed down by poverty, obesity, and the constraints of small-town life, yet also someone who seemed to shine with humor, self-deprecation, and a relatability that quickly made her a fan favorite. Alongside her sister Tammy, Amy gave the world a raw look into their shared reality, where health problems collided with financial instability and family drama unfolded unfiltered in front of the cameras. To audiences across the world, Amy was the brighter light of the two sisters, the one who seemed capable of change, who cracked jokes when things grew too heavy, who made fans believe that transformation was not only possible but inevitable, and when she underwent gastric bypass surgery, losing weight in front of millions of viewers, the applause was deafening. For a brief moment, she seemed to embody what the show had promised from the very beginning: hope. And when her pregnancy was announced, it felt to fans like the ultimate victory, a sign that all the pain, all the surgeries, all the sacrifices had paid off, because Amy had not only saved her own life but created new life. Yet what cameras capture and what life truly is are rarely the same, and as the months turned into years, as seasons stretched and storylines repeated, the cracks began to show. Behind Amy's goofy personality and quick wit were stress fractures widening under the relentless weight of expectation, marriage struggles, and the peculiar distortions of fame. Where Tammy's stubbornness often drew public ire, Amy was expected to be the reliable one, the success story, the redemption arc of the Slayton family. She was meant to be the sister who made it, but quietly, off-camera, Amy was slipping. Insiders whispered about fights with her then-husband Michael, about meltdowns that producers worked tirelessly to keep out of episodes, about late arrivals to filming and erratic behavior. The same audience that had once adored her began to notice subtle shifts: the tiredness behind her eyes, the forced quality of her laughter, the antagonism in her interactions with family members that had once been light-hearted banter. Fan forums buzzed with speculation, online discussions growing louder with each season as more people asked the same question: what happened to Amy? The answer, as it unfolded, was that the transformation arc sold to viewers was incomplete, for the surgery, the weight loss, and the babies did not erase the deeper struggles that could not be cured by a diet plan or cheered away by an adoring audience. Amy's marriage to Michael, which had been shaky even before cameras arrived, cracked under the strain of constant exposure. Arguments that once took place behind closed doors became fodder for speculation, and when the divorce papers came, the fallout was public. The custody battle over their children became one of the darkest chapters in Amy's story, with accusations flying in both directions, Michael claiming Amy was unstable and unfit to provide proper care, Amy accusing him of being controlling, unsupportive, and emotionally damaging. For fans who had celebrated her pregnancies as triumphs, the bitter fight for her children's well-being was disillusioning, and gossip spread like wildfire that Amy's private life was not only unraveling but doing so in ways that TLC could no longer control with editing. The saga of Amy and Tammy Slaton has always been a story that television could only partially capture, because while the cameras rolled for TLC's 1,000-pound sisters and millions of viewers tuned in to watch two siblings struggle with weight, health, and the pursuit of something resembling normalcy under the glare of fame, the truth is that what unfolded off-camera often rivaled or even eclipsed the dramatics of what made it to air, and nowhere is that clearer than in the shocking eruption of the property battle that now pits sister against sister in a way that even the most imaginative producer could not script, a legal war that began quietly with whispers of signatures and transfers but exploded into betrayal, heartbreak, and accusations that have left the family splintered, fans divided, and the public enthralled by a scandal that is as much about money and power as it is about love, loyalty, and the devastating cracks that fame carves into once solid family bonds. The Slaton sisters were never strangers to conflict, their banter on screen often laced with the sharp edges of frustration, their love always underscored by a tension born of shared struggle and clashing personalities. But insiders say the feud that now rages between them did not come from nowhere. It had been simmering for years, hidden beneath edited smiles and the illusion of unity presented to fans, a slow burn that finally found its spark in a piece of property that Tammy considered hers. A sanctuary, an investment, a promise of stability in a life where chaos too often reigned. According to whispers that grew louder as documents surfaced, Amy allegedly had the property transferred into her name without Tammy's knowledge or consent, a maneuver that some close to the family describe as protective, others as predatory, but all agree was the match that ignited a firestorm. Because when Tammy stumbled across the truth while combing through records for what she thought would be simple personal planning, the realization that her own sister had effectively taken her home from under her shattered whatever fragile trust remained between them. To outsiders, it may appear as just another squabble over assets, but for Tammy it cut to the core, because this was not just about bricks and mortar, about deeds and valuations, it was about memory and meaning, about a place tied to her sense of identity and her hopes for a future beyond the glare of the spotlight. And to see Amy's name where hers should have been felt like the ultimate betrayal, a theft not just of property but of dignity and sisterhood itself. Reports say Tammy's first reaction was disbelief, then heartbreak, and then fury, and soon after came the decision that stunned even insiders who thought they had seen every flavor of Slaton drama, Tammy filing suit against Amy, not just demanding the return of the property but also claiming damages for the emotional and financial harm she believes the betrayal caused, a lawsuit that instantly tore open the private wounds of their relationship and displayed them for the world to dissect. The amount at stake is said to be nearly $500,000, a sum that only inflames the drama further, because it turns the feud into a battle not only over feelings but over real fortune, and when money and family collide under the public eye, the fallout is rarely clean or quiet. Already, social media has erupted, fans splintering into camps, some defending Amy as the sister who always tried to hold things together, arguing that she likely acted out of concern during Tammy's turbulent times in rehab and health recovery, perhaps believing she was shielding her sister's interests from mismanagement, while others championed Tammy, pointing out that protection without consent is no protection at all, framing Amy's actions as a cold power grab, a calculated move to strip Tammy of autonomy and ownership in the moment when she was most vulnerable. The truth, of course, lies somewhere tangled between those narratives, but in the realm of dramatized storytelling, perception matters more than precision, and the perception now is of two sisters who once stood united before the cameras now locked in a bitter war that could destroy them both. Behind the scenes, insiders described the emotional toll as catastrophic, saying that Tammy feels gutted not just financially but spiritually, as though her identity has been ripped from her, while Amy, though outwardly composed, is said to be crumbling under the weight of public scorn and private guilt, torn between justifying her actions and fearing that she has indeed crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. Amy Slaton's story was supposed to be the kind of uplifting reality television arc that networks like TLC thrived on, a narrative that began in hardship and ended in triumph, a woman who would defy the odds, overcome obesity, achieve her dreams of motherhood, and inspire viewers all around the world with her humor, resilience, and relatability. When she and her sister Tammy were introduced to audiences on 1,000-Pound Sisters, no one could have predicted just how quickly the two Kentucky siblings would become household names, sparking endless conversations, memes, and debates about their health, their choices, and their messy yet undeniably human family dynamics. At first Amy seemed to embody everything the audience wanted from such a show. She was funny in a self-deprecating way, she was willing to show vulnerability, and she was deeply relatable as a woman who struggled but also carried an unmistakable desire to do better for herself. Her early storyline focused on her dream of having children, her marriage to Michael Holterman, and her desperate attempts to prove to herself and the world that she could not only lose weight but also create the stable family she never had growing up. When she underwent gastric bypass surgery and began to shed pounds, fans erupted in cheers across social media. When she revealed she was pregnant, viewers treated it as if it were their personal victory too, because for so long Amy had been cast as the one with the potential to succeed, the sister who might actually rise from the ashes of poverty and obesity and create a better future. On screen, Amy was thriving, and for a moment, it really did seem like the fairy tale was going to come true. But as so many reality stars before her have discovered, what the cameras capture is rarely the full story, and what looks like triumph on screen often conceals darker struggles off camera. While Tammy was painted as the stubborn, angry, and resistant sister, the one viewers criticized for refusing to change, for yelling at her family, for lashing out at doctors, Amy was quietly slipping into her own patterns of destruction. Insiders whispered about fights with Michael that turned increasingly bitter, about stress-induced meltdowns, and about choices that hinted at a woman unraveling under the weight of fame, pressure, and personal demons. Fans who once adored her began to notice a change. The goofy, bright, self-deprecating woman who made them laugh now appeared tired, irritable, and erratic. Her once sparkling eyes seemed dulled, her laughter forced, her patience frayed, and her appearance often reflected stress rather than joy. Online forums became hubs of speculation. Some fans insisted Amy was simply overwhelmed with motherhood and the pressures of being on television, while others argued that something more sinister was going on. Her marriage to Michael, once portrayed as stable and supportive, now seemed riddled with cracks. The custody battles that would come later were foreshadowed by subtle tension on screen. Arguments about chores, money, and Amy's priorities leaked through even when TLC's editing tried to emphasize lighter, comedic tones. Viewers who had rooted for her began to whisper among themselves in comment sections and fan groups that Amy was changing, and not in the way they had hoped. The turning point came when rumors of drug use began circulating online, tied not only to Amy herself but also to her new relationship with Brian Lavaughn after her marriage to Michael collapsed. Online, the backlash reached a fever pitch. Comment sections filled with fans who accused her of neglecting her children, of choosing men and bad habits over motherhood, of backsliding into unhealthy behaviors after surgery. Blurry photos and alleged eyewitness accounts circulated as proof of her recklessness, though the accuracy of such evidence was questionable. In the ruthless world of social media, however, proof mattered less than perception, and perception had solidified. Amy was a failure. Once praised as an inspiration, she was now vilified as selfish and irresponsible, and every pound regained, every public misstep, every rumor fueled the fire. To many, Amy's fall was particularly painful because it was avoidable. She had been given every chance to succeed: surgery, financial stability, fame, and the unconditional love of a devoted fanbase, and she had squandered it. At least, that was the story fans told online, framing her as the architect of her own destruction, blind to the immense pressures of life lived under the gaze of millions, the relentless demands of producers, the distortions of fame, and the personal demons that cannot be surgically removed. Amy herself rarely spoke directly to the allegations, her silence only deepening the sense of mystery, but those closest to her described a woman overwhelmed by forces she could not control, torn between her responsibilities as a mother, her struggles as a woman still fighting the scars of poverty and trauma, and her identity as a reality TV character expected to perform her life for others' consumption. By the time TLC began shifting focus away from her, it was clear that Amy's television career was all but over. Producers leaned harder into Tammy's redemption, Amanda's fiery personality, and Chris's supportive brotherly role, leaving Amy increasingly sidelined. Rumors circulated that she would not be a central figure in upcoming seasons, that her arc had ended, that her story no longer fit the narrative the network wanted to tell. For Amy, the loss of screen time was more than just a career setback, it was a public erasure, the collapse of the platform that had once elevated her, the final confirmation that she was no longer the beloved sister but the forgotten one. Yet the true tragedy of Amy's downfall was not simply the end of her television career but the deeper unraveling beneath the surface, the personal losses that no producer could script or spin. Her marriage was gone, her reputation tarnished, her motherhood called into question, her health slipping backward, and her once bright public image shattered. Fans who had once cheered her victories now mocked her defeats, turning the woman they once adored into a cautionary tale. Amy's name became synonymous with chaos and scandal, with wasted opportunity and self-destruction, her every move dissected not with love but with scorn. What made it worse was the contrast, the cruel irony that Tammy, the sister who had once been despised, was now the phoenix rising from the ashes, celebrated for her resilience and rewarded with newfound respect. In that reversal lay the starkest proof of Amy's decline, for her collapse was not only personal but public, played out in the shadow of her sister's redemption. Where Tammy's story offered hope, Amy's offered only warning. And as TLC quietly distanced itself from her, as fans abandoned her, as rumors of drugs and toxic relationships